La libertad está de moda, está tan de moda que aquellos gobiernos que se oponen a la libertad dicen que son liberales. Pero ¿qué significa realmente la libertad? ¿Por qué es importante en la economía y en la política en el mundo? ¿Y cuáles son las principales amenazas que está sufriendo la libertad? Hoy tenemos a dos visitantes muy distinguidos de los Estados Unidos. Brad Lips colabora en Atlas Network desde 1998 y a partir del año 2009 es director ejecutivo de esta red. Tom Palmer es vicepresidente de programas internacionales de Atlas Network y autor de importantes libros de difusión de las ideas liberales, entre ellos La moralidad del capitalismo, lo que tus profesores no te dicen, por qué la libertad, tu vida, tus elecciones, tu futuro, y después del estado de bienestar, los políticos robaron tu futuro, tú puedes recuperarlo. Thank you very much, Brad Lips and Tom Palmer, for being here with us. We're gonna use English. I'm not going to subject you to using Spanish. But let me tell you, I mean, every politician today defends freedom or claims to defend freedom. And when we look at public policies, the situation is entirely different. What's happening?
Broadly, I think that those of us who care about liberal ideas need to do a better job at communicating to the broad population why everyone benefits from institutions that protect the sphere of individual liberty and why we should be more attentive to encroachments on economic liberties and other interventions in how people live. I think that one of the things that politicians are very adept at doing is championing the interests of the little guy, but then the way that they try to deliver on promises invariably winds up aggregating more power to themselves, often at the expense of the public they're supposed to be helping. So trying to make this persuasive case for liberty and the public policy changes that it entails. That's what Atlas Network is trying to support via locally grown civil society organizations all around the world, including the United States, where we come from, including in Mexico.
Is there a reaction against liberty, against freedom? We see governments like the U.S. government, they support or they claim to support liberty and freedom, but they restrict trade. They have new tariffs imposed on various nations. We have Mexico, in which we have a ruler who claims to be a liberal, a classical liberal, but who claims all of the problems of the country are a consequence of neoliberalism. What's happening? Is there a reaction against freedom?
Well, I think that there's a contest now. After the end of the Soviet Union, people thought that liberal ideas would be triumphant, and some people were very naive about that. But indeed, the impulse to control other people, I think, is part of the human soul. We'll never be completely free of it. And it's come back in a big way with populism. And populism has this core idea that one politician or one party or one movement is the only representative of the authentic people, and the others are the enemy. We hear this from Donald Trump all the time. Mm-hmm. This language, I am your voice, only I can do it. I represent you.
That's what Hugo Chavez used to say in Venezuela. I am the people. I am the state. That's Louis XIV, if I remember correctly.
This idea, I think, is extremely corrosive. It speaks to a kind of freedom, which is the freedom of the state to rule the people, but not individual freedom. And all social progress, all of the advances of the last hundreds of years have come from individual freedom, the freedom of the individual person. Populism is currently competing with that idea. They claim there's an authentic freedom of the people as such. But the consequence is the individual is sacrificed, minorities are crushed and exterminated, and most importantly, the rulers who claim to represent the people enrich themselves beyond measure. Look at Maduro. Look at the richest person in Venezuela is the daughter of Hugo Chavez. This is the pattern everywhere. Those who believe in the dignity of the human person need to stand up for individual liberty, which means real liberalism.
I've grown used to the fact that politicians lie, but for a long time we heard that the Democratic Republic of Germany was the part of Germany that wasn't democratic, or the Democratic Republic of Korea isn't democratic. Now we hear a lot the word liberal which I assumed came from liberty, used as an excuse to control liberties, to eliminate liberties. Why are we seeing that?
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the interesting sort of semantic questions that we wrestle with. The word liberty is used, or liberal has been used in different ways in different countries, which I think complicates the expression.
Well, in the United States, it's even worse. I mean, liberal means exactly the contrary of what liberal means.
No, without a doubt, and I think it's worth trying to fight for the words that best represent what we believe in. But the part of our thinking has been that the organizations that we work with in different contexts are going to be able to identify the policy priorities that really make a difference in people's lives, and that perhaps the debates over the direction of liberty in the world are a little bit pie in the sky. What we're really interested in is how do you affect changes that open up the sphere of individual opportunity for regular people, and can we communicate how those benefits are rooted in these traditions of respecting human dignity and trying to give everyone equality under the law. That these are the fundamentals that need to be conveyed, and often that happens in more pragmatic ways and in more practical changes than sort of esoteric debates.
You mentioned that the Soviet Union collapsed, and clearly it was a society that wasn't competitive in the world. But we had all kinds of philosophers like Francis Fukuyama, who said, okay, this is the end of history, now it's all paradise and utopia. You said that doesn't work that way. What can we expect in the future, especially at a time when these populist ideas are having a resurgence?
Well, if they're not checked, we should expect more conflict. This is very important. Real liberalism, which believes in limited government and market exchange and freedom of trade, is the only philosophy that can actually be global, because you don't hate other people. You can trade with other people to mutual benefit. You can coexist. But all forms of nationalism and populism are about the enemy. Mm-hmm. They all lead to conflict. So we see populists around the world. They seem to be common. They're populists against liberalism, but they all hate each other. Mm-hmm. Every nationalist in Europe hates the next nation.
Yeah, that's true.
If they are successful, we should expect to see terrible consequences, like the 1930s. And indeed, Steve Bannon, who was one of the architects of this Trumpismo movement, he said it will be as exciting as the 1930s. Well, from a liberal perspective, the 1930s
was the time of the Nazis and the fascists.
It was a terrible time.
And the communists.
And huge numbers of people were exterminated and murdered in the name of the people or the nation. What we need to do is to promote the only philosophy of peace, and that is liberalism and freedom of trade. That's how people can live together, because they see each other as beneficial neighbors. There was a great German economist in the 19th century, John Prince Smith. He said, if only we could see other people, foreigners, as potential customers, we wouldn't shoot them.
Of course.
And that is really one of the keys, is to stand firm for free trade.
But President Trump claims that what's going to make America great again is if Americans only consume what Americans are producing. And we have exactly the same position with President López Obrador in Mexico. He says that Mexico has to be self-sufficient and only consume what it produces. What's your opinion?
That.
Well, whoever, yeah.
No, I think it's a virus that is inherent in the nationalism and the populism that seems ascendant, whether it comes from the right or the left. This idea that that self-sufficiency within borders somehow it should be the aim, without recognizing that, as Tom says, if you're really trying to strive for a peaceful and more prosperous world, you need to look at how you not only coexist with your neighbors, but how you operate in a system of beneficial mutual exchange. That this is the virus that true liberals need to be confronting.
Tom, if I look at the figures, historical figures, this is probably the best of times. Poverty is at record low levels. People know how to read and write, which is something they didn't know how to do a few decades ago. There's more prosperity than ever, and at the same time we have more attacks and more deception and more reactions against the system that has promoted this prosperity. Why is that, and what can we do about it?
I think it's a complicated question to explain why this is happening at a time of record prosperity. So let's take the issue of inequality.
You do agree that it's record prosperity?
Absolutely, there's no question about that. And globally, inequality is at the lowest point it's been in all of human history.
So even inequality, it's not just poverty that has dropped, it's also inequality.
As well. You look about the enormous rise in living standards in so many countries. The problem is sometimes there's a perception gap that people expect it to continue on, and they see that they don't understand how poor their parents were. I mean, that's just one of the fundamental things. When I was growing up, we didn't fly in airplanes, we didn't have air conditioning, certainly didn't have smartphones, all those sort of things. Now people take that for granted, but that's a huge increase in human well-being. Dental care, you can go down the list of things that people take for granted today that their parents or grandparents didn't have. The quality of medical care that even poor people get is often better than that the multimillionaires could get 30 or 40 years ago, because the drugs and the treatments were simply unavailable. So the paradox is, why is it that there's dissatisfaction with the engine of growth? That's what we need to explain. That if you want to continue rising in living standards and to see those people who are still poor rise out of poverty, you need trade, you need market economy, and that includes international trade.
I do want to thank both of you, Brad Lips, Tom Palmer, for helping us trying to understand freedom in the economy and in politics as well.
Thank you so much.
Y a usted, amigo televidente que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se le olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.